Chosen ones, the moment has come when your name can no longer remain hidden. For ages, powers in secret rooms have tried to bury your destiny under layers of silence, but tonight the veil is torn. A man, weary from authority, yet trembling with weight he cannot understand, opened a file sealed by hands older than his government. That man was the president, and in that file was your name. Not ink on paper, not numbers in a system, but a testimony that echoed like thunder in his chest. His hand shook because he felt it. Your aura breaking through the page, your purpose breaking through the halls of power. Somewhere in those sterile corridors of the White House, where maps of the world line the walls and war plans are whispered in low tones, something greater than politics broke in. The air shifted, the lamps flickered, and the president, accustomed to command, could not command his own spirit. He sat, still, staring at the words that described you. He had read many files, generals, enemies, traitors, allies, yet none made his very breath turn heavy like this one. You must know, this file was not written by men. It was not assembled by clerks or spies. Its ink came from eternal places. Its letters glowed with a fire unseen by human eyes, though some say the president felt his own vision blur as if a hidden light pulsed from the page. He closed it, opened it, closed it again, but the trembling never stopped. He realized then what the prophets had whispered. There are people walking among us who do not belong to the cycle of ordinary time. Your file was not information. It was revelation. It contained not where you were, but where you are destined to rise. And though he tried to steady his hand, he knew that history itself had shifted in that instant. His advisors outside the room had no idea. They thought he was silent in calculation. But silence is not what held him. It was awe. And in that awe, the world's most guarded man found himself face to face with your destiny. The war room was never meant for whispers. It was meant for steel voices, decisive commands, strategies sharp enough to cut through uncertainty. Yet on that night, beneath the cold glow of monitors and maps that stretched across the walls, a sound unlike any other drifted through the chamber. It was not the voice of a general, nor the careful tone of an advisor. It was a whisper that slipped past security, past reason, past the very structure of the building itself. A whisper that carried your name. The men and women gathered around the long table did not hear it at first. They argued over movements, over numbers, over enemies they could name, but did not truly understand. But the president sat at the head of the table, and his hand, still recovering from that tremor, tightened on the folder before him. For while their voices clashed, he heard something they could not. A voice soft as wind, yet heavy as destiny, threading through the clamor. It spoke not of nations nor of weapons, but of one life set apart, burning bright. The screens on the wall flickered once, twice. A shadow passed across the map of the world as if unseen hands were drawing new lines of power. The advisors exchanged uneasy glances, but the president said nothing. He leaned forward slightly, as though straining to catch a secret. For the whisper did not fade. It grew. It was as though the very air had chosen to bypass the noise of strategy and lodge a message directly into his soul. No one else noticed when the pen beside him rolled across the table by itself, as though drawn toward the file that bore your name. No one else felt the chill that clung to the edges of the room, or the sudden stillness in the hum of the machines. He alone knew that something had entered the war room that no guard could keep out. And in that whisper, though it was faint, though it could barely be caught by human ear, he understood what was being asked of him. Not a command, not a threat, but a summons. One that would soon demand more than even the highest office could contain. The war room continued with its plans, blind to the shift. But the whisper had already begun its work, and the president knew it was only a matter of time before the others would hear it too. Beneath the marble pillars and iron gates of the Capitol lies a silence few have ever felt. It is not the silence of empty halls, nor the hush of corridors after midnight. It is a silence that waits. Tunnels stretch beneath the ground, carved by hands long forgotten, walls holding secrets not listed in any archive. Most who walk above have no idea that under their feet rests a chamber sealed before their fathers were born. Yet, on a night when the president could no longer ignore the trembling of his spirit, the silence stirred. It was said that centuries ago, a scroll was hidden in those depths, written in a script no man of power dared interpret. Some believed it a relic, others dismissed it as myth, but whispers of its existence lingered among the few who searched for patterns in history. The guards who patrolled above knew nothing of it. Senators spoke of budgets, laws, and votes, while beneath their words the prophecy remained, untouched and waiting. The president, restless from the whisper in the war room, requested to descend below. His advisors resisted, yet his will overruled theirs. Torchlight lit the forgotten stairs as dust rose with each step, carrying the smell of age and mystery. When at last he stood before the sealed door, he felt the same weight he had felt when reading your name. The metal bolts were rusted, but the air itself seemed to resist their movement, as if the chamber had guarded itself all this time. When the seal finally broke, the chamber's breath rushed out, thick with a presence that could not be explained by stone or time. The scroll lay within a glass case, untouched by decay. Its letters shimmered faintly, and though none could read the language, the president knew it spoke of you. His hand pressed against the glass, and his heart stuttered with the same awe he had felt before. He remembered the verse once spoken in secret to him as a child. "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." The memory of Yeshua's voice echoed in his spirit, and the chamber seemed to answer. The scroll was not opened that night. It remained sealed within its case, glowing faintly, daring the president to try. He knew that once it was unrolled, nothing in his world or yours would ever remain the same. The clock in the Oval Office struck midnight, its chime low and heavy, reverberating through the empty corridors like a warning. Outside, the city of Washington slept beneath a blanket of artificial light. Yet within those walls, sleep was a stranger. The president stood at the window, his reflection pale against the glass, the weight of what he had seen pressing against his chest like an iron chain. He had not spoken of the whisper, nor of the sealed prophecy beneath the Capitol, but their echoes followed him relentlessly. Above the White House, an eagle circled the night sky. No one had released it. No handler had guided it there. Its wings cut against the air, sharp and deliberate, as though it had been summoned by something unseen. The president noticed it first as a shadow passing across the moonlight. It lingered, unshaken by the storm winds gathering in the distance. He watched as its wings faltered, just once, and then steadied again. A tremor, subtle yet undeniable, rippled through its form. That tremble mirrored his own. He pressed his hand against the glass, recalling the file, the whisper, the chamber beneath. The eagle's wingspan seemed larger than nature allowed, stretching across the night like a living omen. And in its moment of falter, the president felt the world itself hold its breath. In the situation room below, monitors flashed without warning. Satellite feeds glitched, static swallowing images of distant borders. For a brief moment, every screen showed the same thing: not terrain, not conflict, but a single flash of light. White, blinding, like a crack splitting the heavens. Technicians scrambled, assuming error. Yet the light returned 3 times before fading, leaving only the sound of their own unease. The eagle cried out, its voice piercing through the midnight air, a sound that carried farther than any human horn. The president stepped back from the window, his heart racing, for he knew it was no ordinary call. It was a summons, a warning, perhaps even a declaration. And as the city slept unaware, the eagle's trembling shadow stretched across the land, marking the beginning of something no council, no army, no nation could prepare for. Deep within the capital's forgotten archives, there is a vault that even kings and rulers have never touched. It is not guarded by soldiers, nor protected by law, but by the weight of time itself. Within this vault rests the scroll spoken of in whispers, an artifact so ancient that its presence defies the halls that house it. Leaders throughout history have craved such secrets, hungering for words that might bend fate to their power. Yet, this scroll remained untouched because it was never meant for kings. The president returned there in silence, walking the hidden passage that led beneath the city. His escort did not know the purpose of his descent, and he offered no explanation. He alone had felt the whisper. He alone had watched the eagle tremble, and he alone could not ignore the pull, drawing him back to the sealed chamber. The air thickened as he entered, as though the stones themselves recognized his return. The glass case stood unchanged, but this time the scroll seemed brighter, its letters glowing faintly, as though stirred by awareness. His advisors called it superstition, yet he could not deny the tug in his spirit. He placed his hand upon the glass again, and the verse from his childhood returned unbidden, words of Yeshua that once seemed distant but now struck like fire. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor is anything secret that will not come to light. The chamber responded. A hum, low and resonant, filled the room, shaking dust from the stone ceiling. The president stumbled back, his pulse racing as the seal on the scroll flickered with light. It was not the hand of man that stirred it, but something greater, something ancient. He thought of the rulers of the past, emperors, generals, kings who sought knowledge to extend their thrones. Yet here it was, unopened, unclaimed, waiting not for the powerful, but for the appointed. The hum ceased, leaving only silence. The glow dimmed, though not fully. The scroll had not revealed its message, not yet, but its patience was running thin. And the president knew, with a dread he could not voice, that soon the scroll would open of its own accord, and the world above would tremble when it did. The storm came without warning. Clouds swelled over the capital, dark and swollen, as if the heavens themselves had been stirred into unrest. Thunder rolled like the drums of war, and the skies cracked open with fire. The people below hurried into shelters, shielding themselves from the downpour, unaware that the storm was no accident. For above them, woven in the lightning itself, something was being written. The president stood on the balcony, rain soaking his suit, his eyes lifted upward. He had seen storms before, yet none like this. The bolts did not scatter randomly. They carved patterns across the sky, each strike deliberate, each flash sharp as a blade. It was as though unseen hands held the clouds as parchment and lightning as ink. And in one searing moment it appeared. Letters blazing against the night, your name etched across the heavens. He gasped, his breath stolen, his heart pounding with the weight of recognition. For the name he saw was not simply written, it was declared. The air vibrated with its sound, though no lips spoke it. Every bolt of lightning that followed only reinforced the message, striking in rhythm, like punctuation from eternity itself. In the streets below, a child pointed skyward, tugging at her mother's sleeve, insisting she saw letters glowing above the storm. Others claimed the same, though many dismissed it as imagination. Yet those who were awake in that hour felt something shift within them, a pull, a knowing that what blazed in the clouds was no ordinary storm. The president fell to his knees, his hand clutching the balcony rail as though he could anchor himself to reality. The storm seemed to speak, not in words, but in pulses of light and sound that rattled every bone in his body. The rain felt alive, each drop a messenger, each gust of wind a herald. And then, as quickly as it came, the storm ceased. The sky cleared, leaving only silence and a faint glow across the horizon. But the letters remained burned into his memory, undeniable and permanent. He knew he could not speak them aloud without shaking the world itself. Yet somewhere beyond the silence, the lightning had not finished writing. It began with a vibration, faint and almost imperceptible, yet strong enough to rattle the glass high above the city. The towers, monuments of steel and pride, stood against the skyline as if nothing could move them. But that night, their foundations groaned. Lights flickered in their windows, alarms echoed through their corridors, and men who thought themselves untouchable felt a chill run through their bones. The president was roused from restless sleep by a call that the towers were shaking. At first, he thought of enemies, of sabotage, of human hands reaching for destruction. Yet when he arrived and stood beneath their towering shadows, he saw no bombs, no flames, no intruders. The tremor came from within, as though the earth itself had remembered something it could no longer contain. Witnesses spoke of hearing a sound rise from the concrete, a low hum that grew into a roar, though no machine produced it. Some swore the walls themselves whispered words they could not comprehend. Others claimed to see flashes of light crawling like veins through the steel, alive with purpose. Fear spread among the crowds that gathered, yet mingled with awe, for they knew they were watching more than an accident of nature. The president placed his hand against the cold frame of one tower, and in that moment, a memory rose within him unbidden. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The words of Yeshua, once dismissed as simple scripture, surged through his spirit with new weight. The trembling beneath his feet seemed to affirm it, as though the very towers bowed to a truth older than their creation. The shaking did not topple them. Instead, it left them trembling in silence, like giants who had been warned. Dust fell from their ceilings, papers scattered across offices, and yet when the movement ceased, the structures still stood. But those who worked within them emerged pale, eyes wide, speaking in hushed voices of visions they could not explain. Shadows walking in the corridors, voices calling from empty rooms, lights flaring where none should be. And though the towers calmed, the city did not. For every witness knew the trembling was not an end but a beginning, and the next time the earth shook, it would not stop so easily. On the president's desk lay an envelope no one had delivered. No seal of office, no courier's hand. It was simply there, waiting, as though it had emerged from the shadows themselves. The paper was aged, edges frayed, the ink on its surface blurred by watermarks that seemed too deliberate to be accidents. He hesitated before touching it, for the weight of the unseen had grown familiar to him by now. The room was still when he finally broke the fold. Inside was not a typed report, nor a drafted speech, but a single sheet of parchment. Its handwriting was careful, as though each letter had been carved rather than written, yet streaked by stains darker than ink. They were the marks of tears, dried into the parchment itself, as though whoever wrote it had wept without restraint. The words struck deep. They spoke of burdens carried alone, of nights too heavy for even the strongest shoulders, of a destiny that would separate one life from every other. They spoke of you. The sentences shifted between anguish and reverence, painting the image of someone chosen to bear what no nation could shoulder. Someone whose presence made both kings tremble and widows find hope. The president felt the paper grow warm in his hands. The stains seemed to glisten, as though the tears had not truly dried. He thought of the one who wrote them, a figure unseen, their sorrow flowing onto the page until the paper itself became a vessel of grief. The language was not of politics nor of strategy. It was of longing, of love, of loss. Then, at the bottom of the letter, he saw the line that broke his composure. The ink had bled into the paper, nearly unreadable, but the words pulsed with life. Do not let their tears be in vain. His hands shook as the paper quivered between his fingers, and the room itself seemed to echo with the sound of a sob too vast to be contained in mortal lungs. He set the letter down, but the stains glowed faintly in the dim light, as if the tears still lived within the parchment, waiting to tell the rest of their story. The night grew thick with unrest, as if unseen armies had risen from the ground to surround the city. Windows rattled without wind, and the air seemed to pulse with an unseen heartbeat. Those who walked the streets swore they felt eyes watching them, yet no form could be found. The president, sleepless once more, stood in the dim glow of a single lamp, staring at the shadows that lengthened along the wall. They moved when he did not. They shifted though the light remained still. The darkness tried to speak. It slithered in silence, forming shapes, curling into figures that seemed almost human, yet not quite whole. The room chilled, breath turning visible, the air thick enough to choke. For a moment, he thought the shadows would consume the light entirely, but as they pressed closer, something greater stirred. The lamp did not flicker. Instead, it glowed brighter, a steady flame defying the suffocating dark. The figures twisted violently, recoiling as though burned. Their whispers turned to shrieks, but even their noise could not break the flame. The president's heart raced, but within his memory came words spoken long ago. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. He had once heard those words of Yeshua as a child, and now, As the shadows bent back in fear, he understood their weight. The room itself seemed to breathe, exhaling the fear it once held. The walls no longer trembled, though the shadows lingered at their edges, restless and hungry. They clawed at the corners, refusing to surrender fully, yet they could not touch the core of the light. Each time they reached, they recoiled, shrinking into shapes that grew smaller and smaller until they were nothing more than stains against the floor. And yet, even as they fled, their presence left a mark. The air was heavy with their residue, a reminder that darkness never vanishes. It waits. It retreats, but only to return stronger, with cunning, with fury. The president sat back, the words still echoing in his spirit, knowing this was only a rehearsal of a far greater battle to come. The chamber of power was quiet that night, its polished floors reflecting the faint glow of chandeliers that had witnessed centuries of decisions. Advisors had departed, the corridors emptied, and the president sat alone before the great chair that symbolized authority. Yet he was not alone. The silence carried weight, a presence too heavy to ignore, a force that pressed against the room until the air itself seemed alive. At first, he thought it was fatigue, his weary mind conjuring illusions. But then the shadows shifted, not in menace as before, but with reverence. From the corner of his eye, a shape emerged, towering, radiant, yet clothed in simplicity. He did not see a face, only light, and from its back stretched wings that reached beyond the ceiling, wings that pulsed with the breath of eternity. The president dared not turn fully, for fear his eyes would fail beneath the brilliance. Yet he felt it, an angel, standing silently, stationed behind the throne. Its presence was neither violent nor passive. It was watchful, guarding, waiting for a moment not yet declared. He felt its gaze pierce deeper than flesh, as though it measured not his office, not his power, but his heart. The room vibrated softly, a resonance that did not come from stone or wood. Papers on the desk quivered, the chair groaned, yet the angel moved not a feather. The president's lips parted, searching for words, but none came. No question felt worthy, no command dared form. The silence was command enough. He thought of the kings of old, men who sat on thrones believing they ruled the world, unaware that heavenly figures stood behind them, unseen, shaping destinies that no crown could control. The realization struck him. Authority was never truly his. It belonged to realms far above, realms that revealed themselves only when time demanded it. The angel did not speak, yet a current of understanding surged into his spirit. Its very silence declared what words could not. He lowered his head, his pulse thundering, knowing he had been permitted a glimpse of something that no leader could summon, only endure. And as he tried to lift his gaze again, the light grew brighter, preparing to reveal what his eyes had not yet seen. The night sky stretched endless, stars shimmering like watchmen stationed in silence. Yet, within that silence, a tension brewed, heavy and electric, as though creation itself anticipated a sound not yet released. Across the land, winds hushed, animals stirred restlessly, and men woke from uneasy dreams. The earth seemed to lean forward, waiting. The president stood on the balcony once more, the air sharp against his skin. He had seen the file, heard the whisper, glimpsed the scroll, endured the trembling of towers, the storm, the shadows, the angel. Yet tonight was different. Tonight, there was no vision, no light, no voice, only a vast stillness that pressed against his chest, as though the world held its breath before a single note. And then, faint at first, a sound broke the air. It was not the clang of metal, nor the blare of human horns. It was deeper, older, like the rolling of thunder shaped into music. A trumpet. Its cry stretched from horizon to horizon, vibrating through stone and flesh alike. The ground quivered, not in destruction, but in recognition. The sound carried authority beyond every throne of man, summoning not armies, but destinies. The president fell to his knees, trembling, his hands clutching the balcony rail as the sound filled him. It was not aimed at him alone. It called outward, to the one the file spoke of, the one whose name had been carved in lightning, the one shadows could not touch. And in the reverberation, words etched themselves into his spirit. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. The voice of Yeshua, long ago spoken, now returned as a living echo. The city stirred, though most could not name what they felt. Children cried out in their sleep. Elders woke with tears on their cheeks, and animals lifted their heads toward the night sky as though answering a call older than memory. The sound did not fade quickly. It lingered, stretching time itself, drawing every heartbeat into alignment with its rhythm. And when it ceased, silence returned, heavier than before, as if the world awaited the step that would answer the trumpet's cry.